Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Going to Australia Backpacking Working Holidays for Irish Citizens webinar. My name is Sarah Owen. I'm the project leader with Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project. We're a small Dublin-based NGO, and we provide information and support to Irish people leaving Ireland and going abroad, and Irish people returning from abroad. I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleagues Lucia Guzikowski, our comms officer, Daniel Kerwin, our client support officer, as well as Fionnuala Murphy from the Irish Australian Support Association of Queensland. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about who we are, what we do, and then we go straight into the information to help you prepare for departure, help you get set up when you arrive over in Queensland, give you a few tips on minding yourself, talk through employment and especially regional work if you're hoping to extend your working holiday. Talk a little bit about some of the issues that people come run into as well, and then very importantly give you details of where you can get help and how you can contact us if you need our assistance. If we have time, we'll also go into a short Q&A during the presentation today. So as I mentioned, Crosscare Irish Diaspora Support Project provides information and advocacy supports to Irish citizens moving abroad and returning home to Ireland. The information we provide ranges from immigration information and webinars like today, all the way through to information on statutory services in Ireland, accessing social welfare, payments on return, healthcare, housing supports in Ireland, and also navigating the Irish immigration system. So if you meet an Australian and you want to bring them back to Ireland, you might be talking to us in the not too distant future. Fionnuala is going to tell you a little bit about the Irish Australian Support Association of Queensland, but I will just say that the two organisations are funded by the Government of Ireland through Ireland's Emigrant Support Programme, which funds, I think, approximately 500 organisations around the world who are dedicated to supporting Irish people in the diaspora. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Fionnuala.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. And I would like to welcome everybody here to the Sunshine State, otherwise known as Queensland. And it's my name is Fionnuala. As Sarah said, I'm the manager here at IASAQ, fondly known as IASAQ. It's a very long-winded name on our organisation. But look, just to tell you a little bit about IASAQ, I guess, without reading word for word, you can see there what's basically what we do. And it is about obviously supporting and helping all Irish Australian that both come into Queensland for the first time, people that have been here for years. We offer an awful lot of services. Support service, and that's everything maybe from, as I said, backpackers, working holiday makers, but more importantly, we do support the Irish that have been, as I said, that have been here a very short time, right up to people that have lived in Queensland for 30, 40 years. What's known as the first generation of Irish that I know of. I guess I'm first generation here too. But yeah, we offer a lot of supports. We have, our seniors group, we have our mother and baby groups. Those groups are extremely important to people that have been lived here for a long time or have decided in recent years to make Australia home. With the mother and baby group, it is about that connectivity. It's one thing living in a country, it's another when you start having a family. And for lots of women, young women, they may not have, mom and granny or whatever available. So it's very important to kind of come together as moms and, support each other. We do lots there, as I say. We have the outreach worker support, and a lot of that we provide assessments and referral. Advocacy groups, we get a lot of various people that want supports. Again, people that may have been here for a long number of years and have run into some kind of difficulty or are in bother at some point in time. But yeah, just that's a little bit about what we do. You can see that there on the slide. Next slide. So preparing for departure, I guess. Look, I'm going to take it that some of you, or maybe none of you, some people normally, historically, I think a lot of Irish people kind of can land or mostly head to Sydney. and Melbourne in the first instance, but we're going to take it today, obviously, that you come to Queensland direct, and we're just going to kind of go through a few little bits and pieces. And that preparing for departure, obviously, is very, very different for everybody. You know, it is about researching your planned destination. You know, there's different, obviously, parts of Queensland that are different to others. So take, for example, if you land in Brisbane, being a city metropolitan area, it's a lot different than if you move up the coast, you know, heading up to places past Bundaberg, Rockhampton, Townsville, and more especially up into Cairns, which is a very tropical region and can get extremely hot in the summer. Now, I know Irish people, we really do crave some sunshine and heat, but just bear in mind, if you settle in those areas, it can be extremely warm when you get there. Look, before departure, obviously, I would recommend, and it's just from, you know, what I'll talk about, I think, throughout the webinar, is cases, actually real life cases that we have dealt with, you know, people that we've heard information and we've got that information firsthand. Let that be from people coming in as working holidaymakers or businesses, indeed, you know, that are looking for those people to work on their premises. You know, try with accommodation, for example, you know, to try and maybe have accommodation sorted, if you can, within the first, you know, to have something sorted before you arrive here is always good. I think it's about researching, as I said, you know, about where you want to live, you know, the local culture, you know, there's clubs, you know, social groups, sports clubs, all of that kind of thing to help you settle in the country. You know, learn a little bit about the local systems and institutions, you know, because if you've never been to Australia before, it's vastly different, you know, to walk into to any part of Australia. Things are very, very different. It's a very vast country. Things are done a little bit differently, you know, but learning about, you know, public transport, rentals, the law, all of that kind of thing, I think would help you kind of settle or kind of get your head around it a little bit. But obviously that's going to be a bit different when you actually land. You know, networking, SIM card is probably something that you're going to need quite quickly when you arrive, and they can be easily obtained, you know, in your newsagents or mobile network establishments. Telstra is one of those that I've highlighted because of the, you know, in particular, if you're going to work in regional areas, Telstra is one of those services that kind of are the better option. Contact, you know, try and make contact with people, you know, and as I said, we do like to help our fellow Irishmen. We're very good at that when people arrive in the country. The other thing that I would probably suggest, obviously, is to reach out to potential employers before you get here. I'll put a link in there, which is IASAQ, which is one of the bigger employment networks, you know, that you can actually go through and look for some kind, you know, a job before you get here. And again, checking your essential documents. You know, obviously having a current up-to-date passport is always good. A passport, obviously, that has a long number of years on it and something that's not going to run out 12 months into being here. You know, obviously maybe a birth certificate, having a hard copy and an original copy, you know, your relevant visa, driver's license, which is very important, obviously. And these are all forms of ID, because Australia is, you know, I was told this myself before I came to Australia. Australia is paper heaven. They love paperwork and lots of it. You know, and having all of that stuff, you know, having your European health insurance card with the initials IE is a really good thing to have also. And I'll tell you a little bit about that later when it comes to around Medicare. And again, travel insurance, it's about obtaining as much of a comprehensive travel insurance as you possibly can afford. You know, that would cover some of your medical costs, you know, and your belongings and stuff like that. Next slide, Sarah. The other thing is obviously bring in evidence of your qualifications and employment history. We have there about, resume, 2 pages max. It's always good to bring your references, pay slips, your original certificates, and all of those transcripts that you might need when you look to apply for a job. And some of those vary, depending on your degree or your diploma, might not necessarily make sense to an employer over here. So it's really good to, one of the things I would suggest, we have what's known as the Queensland Government Overseas Qualification Unit. And they offer a free overseas qualification assessment. And that's basically, I guess, to help an employer understand, the differences and where that might fit, when you're looking for a particular type of job. So it's free for anybody that has the right to work or study in Australia. The application times for having that assessment done can vary, and it can take up anything up to 6 weeks to do that. But just note that the Overseas Qualifications Unit does not assess trade qualifications. So that's a little bit different than your diploma, your degree, and all of that kind of thing. A trade qualification is a little bit different. And we have what's known as the Trades Recognition Australia, or an approved training organisation, an RTO, and I have the links there for you. And I'm sure having adequate funds is very, very important. Registering for online banking. It's also really important to bring sufficient funds to support yourself until you find, the cost of living here is quite high. For an example, it used to be, I remember back in the day, it had a $5,000 kind of, as a round figure to bring that amount with you when you're coming into Australia. That has vastly changed. And I say that because I've had firsthand experience of talking to young people that are coming into the country. One just the other day that was fortunate enough, obviously, she came in with her partner. She obviously had friends that she could go and live with that were already established. But she actually said to me, it says $4,000 to $5,000, Anula, but she said, it's not near enough. And she was able to move into a house or an apartment that was already established. Can you imagine trying to establish yourself in an apartment and having just that little amount of, when you're actually trying to set yourself up? It's, I really don't think, I can't obviously tell you how much money, but I'm just thinking 5,000 is definitely not near enough with the cost of living. Having an emergency fund is always good. And I'm thinking, to maybe leave an emergency fund at home, leave it aside in case of, and that's even enough to maybe to get yourself back out of the country quickly if you need to, because money goes very, very fast here. So using a currency exchange platform is always very good too when you're doing that kind of thing, because that can be quite costly. Opening a bank account. So, as with any form of application, it's paper heavy. The more identification that you have, any photographic ID, obviously your passport, driver's license, birth certificates, all of that. Proof of address you may also need. You may not have proof of address when you're coming in initially. You may not be on a lease, but one of the things that you will do quite quickly and have done is your tax file number. And that's something that can be used and is recognized very easily for identification. Superannuation is a thing. So basically, sorry, I'll just go back to tax file number there for a second. So your tax file number it's a personal reference number that's lodged with the Australian tax system. And you can do that. You can apply for your tax file number online. And everyone in us working in Australia has the same workplace rights. That's something that I'd really like to kind of take into consideration, is you have the same workplace rights under the National Employment Scheme. and that includes your working holiday maker. And the national minimum wage make up the minimum employment entitlements that must be provided to you as employees. So when you start work, you give your employer a tax file number declaration, and this helps the employer work out how much tax to withhold from your pay. Your employer, if he's registered as, to take on a working holiday maker, they will be able to look up the subclass 417 working holiday visa or the 462 working holiday. But you should tell them anyway to ensure that they tax you correctly. Superannuation is another thing. As a working holiday maker, your employer has to also pay superannuation. It's mandatory. If you're an eligible employee, the percentages of that is very different, to what you pay, depending on the area that you work. So either way, as a working holiday maker, if there will be superannuation stopped from your wages. Equally, if outside of regional work, if you're working after your 88 days, same thing applies. The percentages differ depending if you're working in government or non-government services. And you may be, just remembering, obviously, you may be eligible to claim that super back when you're departing Australia, but it can be heavily taxed. And again, I've just added a link there for you to have a look at. So accommodation, again, the rental market is extremely difficult right now to infiltrate. And as I said, costs have risen dramatically over recent months. It's always worthwhile, maybe, if you can contact friends or try and get into a shared house. That can be really very beneficial. It can also bring its own issues as well. So basically, in and around the cities in particular, it can be very expensive. More rural areas can be a lot cheaper. And just to know that typically, when you come to Australia and you're going to rent, so say you come in with your partner, you come in with a friend, typically there's 4 weeks bond that needs to be paid out automatically, plus 2 weeks in rent on top of that. On average, in Brisbane right now, I can tell you an apartment, and I don't mean this to turn you off or to scare you, I just want you to be aware of the amount, an apartment can cost you anywhere from $600 to $750 or $60 per week. Now, if you calculate that, 4 weeks bond, 2 weeks rent in advance, 5,000 is not going to cut it. So you really, really need to be mindful of that, unless, as I said, you can jump in with somebody that already has that accommodation set up. More often than not, if you go into an apartment for the first time, it's unfurnished more often than not. So that's another expense you really, really need to be aware of. You can buy secondhand furniture or, all of that kind of thing, but obviously that still comes as a cost. The other thing I'd like you to be aware of is, damage, to any apartment or any house that you use. It's taken extremely serious if you damage or you fail to pay any rent. You can lose your bond. So don't forget, you've already paid out a substantial amount of money in bond. And if you damage that property or you leave that property or you stop paying rent, you automatically, as I said, lose the bond, but also you can have a black name against your list because there's a dedicated rental Queensland government department that looks after that bond. But equally, if there's damage or you leave it in any way kind of not in good nick, you can be blacklisted, and that's through the real estate. When you go to look for somebody else for something else, just be aware that that can be there also. Bear in mind with the rental, bear in mind with the rental, there is a thing, what's known, and it's legal, it's called fair wear and tear. So it's really, really important when you go in to, as I said, things to note, the terms and conditions of the lease. know your rights, and one of them is fair wear and tear. And you will get, sometimes you will get places, not so much probably rental businesses, but you'll have people that will rent privately, that might deliberately say to you that you've damaged something or something doesn't look good, but there is a such thing as fair wear and tear. Just be mindful of that, because they may try to say it was damaged, unnecessarily, not unnecessarily, but fair wear and tear, as you can imagine, could be, I don't know, carpet maybe that might get stained, not heavily, deliberately, but that's what's known as fair wear and tear, that they can't stop a bond on you just for doing that kind of thing, or that happening. So getting around public transport is really, really easy to get around in the cities. You have plenty of busway services, your trains, and we have what's known as the City Cat in Brisbane City, which is a beautiful way to travel up and down the Brisbane River if you're fortunate enough to live in and around the city and you're traveling. It's a lovely way to see the city. Very easy to get a go-kart. I would recommend getting the go-kart and have that with you. It's far cheaper to have that go-kart and tap on and tap off rather than pay as you go. Car and driver's license. You can obviously travel, use your overseas driver's license as long as it's current and you're not suspended or disqualified. And if you're purchasing a car, compulsory third-party insurance is mandatory. Registration of car tax can be expensive, but I would highly recommend, and an awful lot of people buy cars because Queensland is so vast. It's fine if you're in and around the cities. You don't always, or you can't always live in and around those places. You may be living in very remote areas, so you might need to purchase a car. That's another expense, something that might happen further down the line. I can't recommend highly enough that you get that car, serviced or looked at by a reputable company, because things have happened. You could buy a car and it could break down 2 hours later out the road, and it can be a very expensive exercise. Just be very mindful of that.
Fionnuala, I'm going to jump in and just ask you a question about exchanging your Irish license. Is it hard to do in Queensland?
No, Sarah, it's not hard to do in Queensland. It's quite straightforward enough, through the Department of Main Roads. What I have seen happen in the past, in recent months, I've had this happen a couple of times now, where people have rung us up or come into the office to say, can you help us? So they've gone to Main Roads, and what's happening is they're obviously not just having their Irish driver's license, but they may need another form of ID, like a passport.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is you have your first and surname on your driver's license, but you might have first name, middle name, and surname on your passport. They won't accept it. Even though there's photographs on both, they won't accept it because it's not identical. And they can't, they're not inclined to want to do that because, as I said, they literally don't read the same. So we've had people contact us and come into us. So we've overcome that a few times now by writing a letter to main Roads on our letterhead to say that we've cited the documents and we're quite happy to vouch to say that this person is that same person, and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of worked quite well. But just to be mindful of it, have a look at your driver's license, have a look and see, is it the same as your passport for those reasons?
Good to know. Thanks. Good tip.
So healthcare. So people may or may not know, I'm sure people maybe do, that we have a reciprocal healthcare agreement between Ireland and Australia, and it allows for Irish citizens to receive free healthcare at public, independent and outpatient hospital care only. And to be eligible for that, you must be a resident, obviously, of Ireland and living in Ireland for at least 6 months prior to moving to Australia. And the documents that you might need to show for that, with your reciprocal agreement, basically, is obviously your Irish passport, if you can have your European healthcare card with the initials IE. That's all covered under. You may need to show other documents to prove that you are a citizen of Ireland, like a work contract or a rental lease agreement that you've had in Ireland, or utility bills. Basically, if something happens to you and you need to use your reciprocal agreement, you need to ask staff in an emergency hospital to treat you under the reciprocal healthcare agreement, but just be aware to have those documents on you as well. And Medicare basically is I'll just give you actually a case study with the reciprocal healthcare agreement. We had a gentleman that we supported some time ago. Now, he had left Ireland a little bit longer. He'd been in Australia a little bit longer than maybe the average person that we're talking about that's coming over at the moment. For one reason and another, I think it was due to maybe him being on different visas and being here for a while. The reciprocal healthcare agreement did not cover him. And what happened to him was he had an accident, quite a serious accident, where he needed to have medical, emergency operation quite quickly and quite soon. As you can imagine, without the reciprocal healthcare agreement, there was a huge cost involved because he needed to have that operation. This young man was living on his own. He didn't have a partner. He didn't have the fact that he was out of work. He had to, number one, try and come up with the money to pay for the operation. He, along with paying his rent, paying bills, he had a good group of friends that rallied around and raised a lot of money for him, number one, to be able to get the operation, but also to continue to pay his rent, his food, and his electricity. Again, the reciprocal healthcare agreement sometimes doesn't always work, depending on the circumstances. He had no health insurance. We tried to see if we could access his super, and they won't pay super out until you're leaving the country. So he wasn't really in a good shape, in that regard. So it was quite a tough situation for him. So with Medicare, that's obviously the universal healthcare system, and we in the Republic of Ireland are not entitled to hold a Medicare card until you at least become a resident, different if you're from Northern Ireland. That's with basically Medicare card services. You can have a look at that online. So with prescription medicine, again, typical example of people coming into the country, where they have not either had the money or the resources to be able to access their medicine that they badly needed. That can be for any one number of reasons, namely the one that I'm thinking of was, for anxiety. He needed to be on medication. So just make sure basically with medication that you bring a supply, and you can bring in, we can talk about that later, you can bring in a supply of medication if it's purely for yourself. And if you look at that link for the Entering Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration is a good one to look at around all of that.
Fionnuala, just on that point, so with the prescription medication, what I'm hearing you say is that it's possible to bring medication into Australia, and there's more information in that link. And then with Medicare, very important for Irish citizens who are from the Republic to know that they aren't going to be covered by that. And although Northern Irish citizens are automatically eligible for Medicare, it's probably important in both cases to have comprehensive travel and health insurance when you're going over on a working holiday. Would you say that's right?
Absolutely. I can't stress it enough. I've seen it time and time again. And you know what? Like, it's like any insurance, I guess. Would you drive your car? If you didn't have insurance, equally, you don't need the insurance until you actually need it. And then it's too late then. And I'm not saying, I don't want to kind of frighten people, but it's actual fact. It's just cases that we see through our organization. But it's easily, like, if you want to bring tablets, medication, I should say, into the country, you need to kind of be able to confirm that the medicines that you're carrying into the country are prescribed to you, or there's a doctor has provided a letter that states you're under treatment and that the medication you're carrying has been prescribed. Almost really important to bring a letter from your doctor, deliberately given the name of that medication, so that, if it can be found, or if it can be, up to something similar in Australia. Just ensure that the medication, if you're traveling, you can bring 3 months supply of medication into the country, but just ensure when you're, number one, to declare it, and number two, that it's intact when you're coming through, because border control, if you declare it, it's fine. If you don't declare it and there's an issue maybe with the packaging, it's not intact, you'll have border police will investigate that. So it's just easier to do the right thing.
That's brilliant. It's very, very important to know that, I think, for people, especially with, you might not necessarily always know that you need to declare that. So I think that's a really good tip.
Yeah. Equally, if you run out of medication, Sarah, you can bring in 3 months supply. If you run out of medication, if you need supply of medication for yourself, you can actually bring it in if it's recognized and understood to be the same type of medication, maybe that they have in Australia, or they understand what it is. You can bring in a 3 month supply directly to yourself. You can have it posted to you.
Great. So important to look at that link then.
Yeah, absolutely. Just have a look through that. So with the next one, we're just talking about minding yourself. And this is something that I often say to people. You're working with different people from different nationalities. And because we speak English and we drive on the same side of the road, doesn't always mean that we understand each other here in Australia. We do speak very fast. It's mindful, obviously, something I had to learn to do was to slow down. Otherwise, you run the risk of repeating yourself on a continuous basis. And for some strange reason, that can get very frustrating. But it also, would you believe, it can actually nearly knock your confidence. If somebody is not understanding you, it can leave you feeling a little bit despondent, There's no humor, of course, like the Irish humor, as we know, but not everybody gets it. So just be mindful of that. Yeah, minding yourself basically is, trying to immerse yourself in not just, I guess, staying with the same group of friends, because that might not always work out. It's just about immersing yourself in community and exploring and learning different cultures, because you will be working with a vast array of different cultures when you're working in Australia. If you can try, the cultural norms, like our slang words are not always understood either. So just kind of be mindful when you're working. So one of the ways that we have kind of established working, or people looking after themselves, again, because we don't have Medicare, a lot of people coming in, working holiday makers don't have Medicare cards. They may not necessarily have the resources, that it may not have a GP that they're familiar with. So we've formed a bit of a partnership with Grow Mental Health, and Grow, I know you're very familiar with in Ireland as well. And these are just peer-to-peer meetings. It's just purely for emotional support. And again, we've had young people come into the country that just need that extra little bit of, it's not in a clinical setting. It doesn't suit everybody. But having said that, to be able to kind of connect with others and have those conversations in a very safe, confidential space. We offer that at our IASAQ offices weekly. The other thing I just wanted to touch on briefly is the 5 stages of adaptation coming to a new country. It doesn't always happen to everybody. I've had this happen a couple of times, and I've talked to people about this over time, about all of the things that can happen with regards, the excitement, the frustration, adjustment, the integration, all of that is a genuine thing that happens to people when they come to a new country. Australia, sometimes it's not for everybody, and it does take a bit of time to adjust and get used to living in such a vast country. that, you know, you do, as I said, go through those stages of, you know, excitement. You're coming to a new country, new people, getting a new job, and it's just amazing. You know, sometimes you can go through those feelings of feeling a little bit frustrated, a little bit lonely. You know, what have I done? I've come to a new country. Oh my God, have I done the right thing? You know, an adjustment and settling in can be a bit chaotic, obviously, trying to find your feet, you know, rental, get a job, you know, it is chaotic and can be and can go on for a couple of weeks or sometimes months. And then obviously that integration, you know, things start to kind of settle down, you get a job, you build a good group of friends, you know, maybe work colleagues, you know, and that starts to kind of, and then that's that confidence thing. It's, you know, you start to get confident with your new surroundings and new life begins. You know, it's literally a thing that people have talked to me about time and time again of those different stages. How people may run into trouble basically is, you know, drug and alcohol testing is it's taken very serious here. And it's a strategy people that employers have to use, obviously, around their work health and safety risks. Because, and it's something that they will do on a daily basis randomly, is test on work sites. Equally, if we're working in farming, they'll test on farms for any drug use or alcohol use. Any good farmer will do that, you know, and it's just basically for your own safety. You know, and the laws vary in different states. You know, obviously, as you can imagine, if you're going on site and you're under the influence, or you're going in and after a heavy night, you know, you're putting your friends, you're putting yourself at risk when you're working on building sites or you're using heavy machinery. A lot of that happens, obviously, when you're working in the mining industry as well. So the next slide. And again, that's something that can be a huge shock. I know I can speak from firsthand experience. I had no idea what pokies were when I came to Australia. It's very, very much in your face. It's everywhere. You know, it's not like when you go out at home, and it's very much a community feel and talking and maybe a bit of music. You know, this is pubs, restaurants, you know, where you have multiple TV screens. You know, gambling is quite a thing, and people, you know, it's been a thing here in Australia for a long time. But obviously, it depends, obviously, you know, if you unfortunately go down that road, and people can, you know, it can have an awful impact on your productivity. Your financial costs can be huge. But you may be starting to hang out with people that are used to that type of thing, you know, in particular with gambling, as we know, if you're lonely, if you're depressed, if you're maybe working in remote areas like mining, it's very easy to slip into that kind of way of living. Just be mindful of it. Next slide. So just basically making sure that you check your visa requirements, know your rights. We have different things here in Australia. Again, it's very much forms and cards and documentation, no matter where you work. Obviously, what's listed there, like yellow card, blue card, white card, they're all cards that are needed to be applied for, depending on the industry that you work in, notwithstanding working with children, which is you must have, it's a very serious offence not to have a blue card. You know, you can have things like traffic control training, all of that. It's all about training and having cards and all that kind of thing. Free online food safety courses, you can do all of those, and it's always good to have those to fall back on. You know, if you have those and you're going into a remote area, in particular to do regional work, it's good to have those cards, and you can do them both for food and alcohol to serve beverages. You know, it's always good to have them as a backup if you're going into the hospitality in regional areas. So with regional work, basically, it's classed, we all know that it's a period, you need to do a period of 88 days in any one 12-month period. And there's only certain postcodes that you can work on. So please be very mindful of those postcodes. And again, we had an instance where we had a girl actually do her 88 days. A farmer took her on. Farmer may have been desperate for work. He took the girl on. She'd done her 88 days for her to then realise she hadn't worked in the proper postcode. That's down to her. That was up to her to make sure that she was working in the proper postcode. So therefore she had to redo her 88 days. It's taken quite seriously. You must do the 88 days within your 12 months to get your following 12 months to stay in Australia.
And Fiona, can I ask, how easy is it to get regional work at the moment in Queensland?
Look, I've spoken with a couple of places, in Cairns in particular. I've talked to some of our Irish counterparts up there, and they say that what's after happening, I guess, in the last, since 2022, I read a report recently from Queensland University. They done a preliminary report around working holidaymakers and backpackers. And what's happening is basically they're bringing in an awful lot of people from the islands, from Palm Island and their surrounding islands that are coming in. So they've given out since 2022 on this report, something like 60,000 visas granted to Palm Island cultures to come in and work, in particular in and around the Cairns area. It's not that easy. I would strongly recommend that if you're traveling to Cairns, it's not an easy place to get to. It's a long drive if you choose to drive. Other than that, you're flying there. Please make sure that there is work in the area. Don't just arrive into Cairns and assume that you're going to get work. Anywhere, if you look at the Queensland map on the east coast, from Bundaberg up, which is the wide Burnett area, right up to Cairns, there's a lot of farming in Bundaberg, but Cairns in particular, I've heard that people are struggling to get regional work. Equally, in that report in Cairns, as of December 2022, there was 9 hostels and including camping sites available to people that arrive into the Cairns area. So accommodation, again, can be a bit of an issue.
So absolutely do your due diligence before. And I suppose the other thing to say to people is that the 88 days might not be consecutive. You might have gaps within that period. So try and factor that in to when you're doing your regional work, and don't leave it right till the end of your 12-month period, right?
Absolutely, so important. I spoke to a young girl like that again the other day, and she had 40 days done of her 88 when she was stood down from what she was doing. I think she may have been banana picking, but I think the weather had taken over at that stage, and she still has 48 days to do. She has since moved down to the Brisbane area and is looking around to get her regional work to finish her 48 days that she's struggling to get. It's interesting, like there is a little bit of a struggle with the 88 days, but on the other hand, there's a little bit of struggle getting ordinary work outside of that as well. And people can't afford not to be working because of the expenses, the cost of living and accommodation as well.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to see, with the seasonal work there, that Workforce Australia is a really, really good website or link to go in and have a look at. And what it is basically, it's a very kosher site. It'll give you the list of regional work around the state, and it'll tell you who's looking for work, what type of work you'll be doing, and all of that. So it's really, really good. It'll tell you the amount of people that they're needing. I read one the other day, I just can't remember the particular industry. It could have been, it was fruit picking of some sort, but I think they were looking for something like 250 in that particular area. I know it sounds like a bit of a contradiction now, but that could whittle down to maybe just needing 10 people. So that link is a really, really good one to go in and look at and see exactly, it'll tell you exactly where and how many jobs are available. Just being smart again, I just wanted to say that I had a conversation with what I kind of call a task force, if you like, and they're based in the Bundaberg region. It's called the Working Tourist Safety Meetings that they have. So a lot of these businesses, hostels, businesses, Queensland State and Federal Police, emergency services, possibly farmers, come to these meetings, come together specifically. The force was actually set up to protect the working holiday maker that's coming into these regions, and all the bits and pieces that can go with that, because they deal with an awful lot of people that are coming and go, vast amount of people at times. So I spoke to 2 of Queensland Police sergeants the other day, specifically yesterday morning, to get some information. Again, this is not to frighten you, it's just to make you aware of what's happening and what can happen on the ground. It's basically, as I said, it was set up to alleviate crimes against, safety basically for the backpacker working holiday maker. They gave me an example actually of a young Irish boy in particular. I'm sure there's lots of nationalities, but this young man that had been severely assaulted. Again, in this sergeant's words, she said to me, that person was very lucky. He had comprehensive insurance to be able to get back home. And that was coming from that sergeant herself. They take the use of, you are not allowed to use drink in the parks. You cannot drink in parks. You cannot drink in public spaces. They take that very, very seriously. It's an offence. Equally, substance abuse is a serious offence and you can be heavily fined and or imprisoned. Public nuisance, obviously. It's a kind of an area, because like that, again, it's hugely vast. There's long distances of travel. You could be traveling for hours, maybe in between places. You need to be aware and drive to the conditions. Don't drive in the evening. Don't drive at dusk, because you have animals like kangaroos that'll spring out, and they're big kangaroos that can just hop out onto a road. You can have driver fatigue. It's quite, it's a region, the sergeants tell me, that has a very high road fatalities, purely for the reasons like that people get driver fatigue, or they're driving at dusk, just not driving to the conditions. You can have random breath testing just because you're in the middle of nowhere and it doesn't look like there's anybody in sight. You'll find somebody will pop out, a police car can pop out anywhere and do a drug and alcohol test on you there and then. So just beware of all that kind of thing. Look, I just want to say at the same time, maybe we'll probably end it on a good note. Australia is a beautiful, beautiful country. It really is. It's very, very easy to live when you're set up. The sunshine makes up for a lot of that. The outdoor living, it's just really, really good place to live. But just being mindful, mind yourself, mind your belongings. We get a lot of people that kind of misplace, lose passports, or they're stolen. There can be a lot of theft. Just sorry, one more thing with the backpackers. I just wanted to let you know that the hostels, not all of the hostels will take Europeans. Some hostels will only take specifically Palm Islanders people. Some hostels will only take people from Asian countries. So not all hostels will take Europeans. Obviously, there are hostels that will, but be aware that you are sharing with other nationalities and other cultures. Just be mindful of that great sense of humor that us Irish have, in particular, maybe when there's a few drinks of an evening. Not everybody understands it. Again, for safety, I think top tips, when you're traveling, please try and travel on your own. It's a vast country, extremely easy to get lost in or disappear in. As I said, the distances between towns can be very far. If you're driving, please have a reliable car for that reason. It's somewhere that you don't want to break down on a road in the middle of nowhere, because the heat can be. The other thing, when you're working outdoors, if you've had a night out, stay extremely well hydrated. Something that typically I think Irish people don't do, because we don't need to that often, is drink a lot of water, a huge amount of water, because the humidity, and they have assured me that, they have seen fatalities due to exhaustion. heat exhaustion and sunburn. So that's something to be very, very mindful. Drink lots of water. When you get to work, you can be drug or alcohol tested by farmers. But yeah, just plenty of water, look after yourself. And as I said, it is a beautiful country and very hard to get out of your system when you leave. A lot of people, when they come in, just want to stay.
That's great, Fionnuala. And there's lots of support services available for people if they fall into difficulty. There's details here in this slide, but also if you do have questions and you want to get in touch with either ourselves and Cross-K Irish Diaspora Support Project in Dublin, you can reach out to us by phone, you can send us an email. We're on all the usual socials as well. We have a new website, diasporasupport.ie, which is launching in June. You can also reach out to Fionnuala and her team over in Brisbane. There's their website there, IASAQ.com.au, a phone number. Now, just be aware you might be incurring some international fees if you're calling from Ireland, but also an email as well. So with that, I'd like to just thank Fionnuala very much for sharing all this really useful information and to encourage you all to complete our brief survey and tell us what you thought of the session today.